All right, well, we're going to be in Mark chapter 1, verse 40 through 45. Like I said, you can turn there in your Bible. There's a few in the seats or on your phone. It'll also be on the screen, as always, later tonight. And here's the deal. I feel like I have to preface this anytime that I talk about the things about my kid that I can't stand. And that first and primarily, I love her. She's adorable. She's super cute. She's way cooler than I could have ever imagined. Now that we have that out of the way, I think that babies are the most disgusting thing on the planet. Okay, now here's the deal. For the most part, I like kids. I like when I get to, hang out with my kid and play with her, and it's adorable, and watching her try to figure out how to walk, and maybe she finds my coffee on the coffee table and tries to drink it, and she's going to burn herself and maybe poison herself with caffeine, and that's adorable and cute. But here's the deal. I'm just kidding. Poisoning children's not cute. It's bad. It's a bad idea. But they are the nastiest population of humans on the planet for a multitude of reasons. One, when you and I have a runny nose, we have just the social standard that we go to a Kleenex box or a toilet paper roll or a sleeve. We go to anything to make sure that it doesn't start invading our face. And we definitely, unless you're a terrible person and you need to reassess your life, do one of these, hi, nice to meet you, right? But small children just let it just go everywhere. They'll be crying, they'll be fussing, it'll come out everywhere, and then they'll wipe. And then, and only then, do they have the immediate urge to touch your face, which is incredibly rude, because if you're sitting in your chemistry class tomorrow, and you just turn to the person next to you, and you're like, that's going to be an office visit. That's going to be super weird. And of course, just in middle school, it happened too. Even as high schoolers, I thought that we had developed out of our caveman populace, but y'all are still hey. And even then, even though I kind of set you up for that, you were still that was weird. I feel disgusting and gross inside. I need hand sanitizer quick, right? You've got some cleanliness, just things about you that are oh, okay, I stand by that. And that's disgusting in and of itself. But there's this other part of children where you and I, when we go to eat, forks, knives, spoons, sometimes multiple of those, dinner plates, we understand how those work. And me and you, I don't know if you ever thought about this, you can't see your mouth, but you always know where it is. No matter what, your hand always finds mouth, closed eyes, still, always there. Children don't quite have that kind of witchcraft within them yet, apparently, because the way that my kid eats is she does a full sweep, and then she's and we'll start here, and they just start dragging until it disappears in the hole in their face, and then they're I got it, I'm so proud of myself. But by that point, there's things on their face that you don't even remember cooking. You're what has happened? And at some point, the parents will go, we know what we need to teach them how to eat. Spaghetti. And it's mostly because we're all broke millennials and that's all that we can cook. And so we're oh, our kids, spaghetti is awesome because we can make a big pot of it for everyone, and our kid needs to learn how to eat what we eat. And so you make the spaghetti and you put it on the tray in front of them, because not a plate, because they'll pick that plate up and be ah! And it's just game over. Or they'll start banging it like they're in a metal band, which then I'm conflicted because I'm that's so hardcore, but this is a mess. And so they'll start eating, and we have to, whenever spaghetti night happens, I go to Haley and I'm do we need to undress her? Do we need to derobe her? Which again, not a question I ever asked in my adult life, coming to the dinner table, and she's oh yeah, for sure, this clothes can't survive this madness. And so we put her diaper only in the seat, and we're just and war has begun. That's the end of it. And she's just everywhere. Noodles, pasta. She's got the Nike swoop on her chest and a pasta noodle. It's just everywhere. And then Haley will just pull this just insane mom move. And I've got to imagine that all moms do it. A dad's in the room just silently grunt, because you don't want to confess if this is true. But she looks at me and she goes, hey, do you want to take her and I'll meet you in the bathroom? What? Thank you. Sam? We know. Right? There's this weird moment And I'm like, I want to do literally everything else. Like, all of a sudden, it's like the bathroom is further than it's ever been before, and I'm doing one of those moves that I thought only existed in sitcom television, where I'm like this one right here, and I'm just like, don't drop her. But also, if I do, it means I'm not holding her anymore. Like, that's what's going on in my head. We get to the bathroom, like the water's running, we just kind of drop her in, and like that's just like pasta water. And then we put her to bed, and we go to bed, like we're like, oh my gosh, that was terrible. Whose idea was this? And then at some point or another, where there's people are like, let's have 7 of them, and those people are called crazy. Okay. You and I have a certain level of cleanliness that we're comfortable with. Okay, and here's what I mean by that. Dirty pasta baby monster, that's where I draw the line. That's it. Like, that's the moment, maybe your parents have ever said this, that I look at Haley and I go, she's your kid, right? This is no longer mine. Now, when she's a track star, then she's mine. Those are my genes and probably some, like, superhuman growth hormones, but mostly those are mine. Okay, but when she's dirty pasta-eating monster, that's Haley. That's from her side of the family. It's been passed down. None of them have used forks for generations, I assume, right? But in this, we all have a certain level of cleanliness. See, in my house, that's my line. Here's Haley's line. I come back for a workout. I walk into the house. I'm a little bit sweaty, just a little bit. Not a lot sweaty. I'm not a monster. I know how deodorant works. And I go back, and I sit on the couch, and she just looks at me from across the room. She goes, I'm like, what? Are you like the drug dog? Are we smuggling in the couches? And she's like, you reek. And I'm like, whoa. First of all, name calling. It's rude. It's unlike Jesus. Second of all, I don't smell that bad, because you never know how bad you smell. But just so you know, everybody else knows how bad you smell, right? And so in those moments, I find out there is the level of cleanliness that Haley is comfortable with, right? Like, I'm not allowed to exist for more than like 10 minutes if she's like, so a shower, like that's not in the cards at any point. I'm like, the judgment feels a little thick, right? But that's her line. Naked pasta baby, that's my line, and it's a normal line. Sweaty husband, that's Haley's line. We all have what we're comfortable with in cleanliness, right? Some of you are like my friend David Stippick. When I was in high school, he was a youth intern in my youth ministry, and we went and saw the midnight premiere of a movie, and this girl, Jenny, was sitting by me, and he was sitting on the other side of me, and before the movie started, Jenny leans over, and she goes, hey, drink out of David's straw. Now, here's the deal. I don't make it a habit of drink sharing, but I'm also not going to vomit, and so I'm like, okay, whatever. Also, as a high school kid, like, whatever. So I grab his drink, I take a sip, it's Dr. Pepper, so it's inferior to Coke, I'm already offended. I put it back, and I wait. David comes back from the bathroom, and Jenny leans over, and she goes, hey, Lane drank out of your soda. And he loses it. Like, grown man adult is like, you did what? And immediately I had to question. I was like, did I kill your dog? No, I just drank out of your soda. He's like, what? No, listen. I can't drink that anymore. I'm like, it's full. You spent like $27 on this because it's a movie theater and it's overpriced soda drink. He's like, no, I can't do it. I'm sorry. And he goes, you're going to go back to the concession stand and get me a straw. I was like, I don't know if we've met. I'm not doing any of those things. Unfortunately, David wanted to be a police officer at the time. He could do things to me that I could not do to him. Eventually, I went and got the straw for him. But here's the deal, right? Like, you and I, we kind of have those things, those lines. Like, you can just hear, like, you're like, drink sharing? Oh, absolutely not. But then there are others of you that are like, like, we'll share a fork. Like, we'll share a cake, and we don't need 2 forks, because who needs 2 forks, right? There are some of you that we're, like, in church on Sundays, and we get to the end of the service, and they're like, hey, everybody hold hands. You're like, oh, everybody, what? And you Germex your hands, lather them up, and hold grandma's hand to your right. And then there are others of you that reach over and you interlock fingers, and you are evil, but you do it anyway, right? We all have our own levels of cleanliness that we're comfortable with. And we have to know that going into tonight, because we're going to talk about what it means to be clean and unclean. And here's what I want to press into tonight, that when we talk about cleanliness, like, we're not just talking about hygiene. See, when we're talking about cleanliness, being unclean, it's more than hygiene. It's about being untouchable. Because here's the deal. Even outside of hygiene and cleanliness and things like that, you and I just have certain things that we are comfortable with and uncomfortable with. We have cultures, we have societal standards, we have conversations, we have places that we are comfortable being in, comfortable doing, and comfortable being with, and then we are uncomfortable with. And we have to know that because when we dive into this passage of Scripture tonight in Mark 1, we're going to see this moment where Jesus has an interaction with someone that's going to be increasingly uncomfortable for the people around them because he deals with someone who's not just unclean by social standards and cultural standards, but deemed unclean by religious standards, which is great conflict for the one who claims to be the Son of God. And also has even legal ramifications with it and has all these ramifications with where they live or where they don't live in the midst of that. And we enter into this moment where Jesus has an interaction with a man with leprosy. And leprosy is this like skin infection disease that's kind of all over the place. It appears as boils, and these people literally live in certain sections of town that nobody else goes around. They're like little colonies for them to touch them, just highly, highly contagious. There are even rituals to be deemed clean coming out of that colony. And in the midst of that, we walk into this moment that Jesus has in Mark chapter 1, and you can see it starting in verse 40 up on the screen, and it says this: Then a man with leprosy came to him and on his knees begged him, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Moved with compassion, Jesus reached out his hand and touched him. "I am willing," he told him, "be made clean." Immediately the leprosy left him and he was made clean. Then he sternly warned him and sent him away at once, telling him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go and show yourself to the priest, and offer what Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them." And yet he went out and began to proclaim it widely and to just spread the news, with the result that Jesus could no longer enter a town openly, but he was out in deserted places, and they came to him from everywhere. Here's what I want us to see in this moment. Jesus does a lot of different miracles throughout Mark. We're going to see different pieces of them in different places. We're only looking at 4 of them throughout this series. But one of the things is that Jesus doesn't always perform a miracle by physical touch. Last week, he just had a conversation with a man and sent demons into pigs to die. But here we have a man who, by all standards, is definitely not supposed to be touched. Probably not even supposed to be with like that close in conversational distance. This is like that situation where you see them walking down one side of the road and you're like, I'm not going to walk on that other side of the road. I'm going to go about 3 blocks out of the way, maybe into a neighboring town, and then back around. Like that level of avoidance. Yet he runs up to Jesus. Jesus doesn't flee. Jesus doesn't run. He has compassion on him. He hurts for him because there's someone that hasn't experienced physical touch in a really long time. And he reaches out and he heals him. And Jesus could have healed him any other way, but Jesus does it through touch. So what we see is this: Jesus cares about the unclean, the outcasts, and the exiled. This person that society has moved aside for health reasons and for contagious reasons, and they've been moved aside there. Jesus cares greatly about him when no one else who claims to know God does, because Jesus knows that he can make him clean. And this man takes a risk and he runs to Jesus and he asks to be made clean, and Jesus has compassion in those moments. He doesn't say, "Well, who do you think you are? What, you need me to heal all the other lepers?" No, he just has an interaction with him and he makes him clean. Jesus cares about him. He has compassion on him. And here's the deal: as I was wrestling through just this idea of what it means to have leprosy or to be a leper, and today, for the most part, we don't just like, thanks to modern medicine and things like that, like we don't just exile people because of their health or because of what they're going through or because of their medical things that are going on in their life. And so instead of deeming people unclean because we believe that they're contagious and unsafe for us to be around, we just start deeming people unclean. We start making people outcast, exiling people from our presence based on a host of other things that have nothing to do with that. Now, sometimes they do have to deal with cleanliness. When I was in middle school is a tough time in your life. No one ever wants to go back there. It's a really weird time where everything is changing all the time. Your voice is cracking. People don't like you one day. They do like you another day. And the social hierarchy is very confusing. But in the midst of that, In the midst of that, what happens is some of us in this room, we grew up in a home with parents who do not neglect us, and we come home, and as we're changing physically, mentally, and emotionally, there does come a day when you walk in the house from playing outside, and you smell completely awful, because all of a sudden sweat is doing something in your body that's never done before. And our parents sit down with us, and they start to have a conversation with us about, hey, you're going to need to wear deodorant. You're going to need to shower more than once a week, preferably 7 times a week would be a good place to start. And they're going to have that conversation with us, and we're going to go to school, and no one's going to know that if we had not had that conversation, we would have came in smelling like butt. Yet, as I was growing up and living in Georgetown, and people from all kinds of different socioeconomic levels and things like that, other classmates would come to school, and they would come to school, and they had less clothes than I did, they had less access to water than I did, to be able to bathe as often as I did, and they had parents that were never home and neglected them, and so when they came to school, they had not had those conversations, they didn't have access to clean clothes the way I did, they did not have access to be clean regularly, and so they actually did come to school in a different hygienic place than I was, and so they were exiled because no one wants to sit in class with a kid who smells. And so naturally, we started making a separation based off of what we thought was like, oh, well, they're just gross. But really, we were making a separation in the back on principle of my family makes more money than you and is better off than you and loves me more than your parents love you. And here I was, a middle school kid that loved Jesus and was just like, yeah, but you just smell. You can fix that. But there are so many other issues at hand. And yet we drew the line and we exiled. And then beyond that, we draw lines all the time. Well, they're not as funny as our group of friends are. They're not as socially inclined as we are. Well, they're just not as smart as we are. They're not as athletically capable as we are. Here's how you know that you're drawing lines. When you talk about somebody, and the primary thing that you talk about is their negative aspects of them, then you are exiling them. You are making a leper of them. Now, don't hear what I'm saying. I'm not saying they are a leper. I'm saying we've chosen to treat them as if they have a medical condition that is contagious to you. Just because they're not as funny as you, because they don't know the same things as you, because their parents don't have as much money as you do, and so they don't own the same things that you do, and they don't vacation in the same places that you do. And they don't listen to the same music that you do. And they're just a little bit weird. And so we exile them and we create outcasts, and even then, sometimes we don't intentionally do it. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. We're not always like intentionally walking around like, be gone, get away from me. But just in the natural order of life, we decide that this is who I will be around, and I will be around nobody else, and so we push them away. And here's what happens is Christians start to hang out in just little circles. And what we see, and you can look around in your school, that all of your church friends are over here, and then there's entire demographics of teenagers in your schools and in your city that there is no one within that would claim to know God. And so you've huddled together, and even just based on principle, you've actually forgotten who Jesus is, and so you've gotten around a lot of other people who know Jesus, and the way that you talk about them and the way that your parents talk about them and the other adults talk about them is you're the good kids who they pat on the back and they say, but they make good grades, and they say, yes, sir, and they say, no, sir, and they're going to go to the good schools. And those kids over there are the bad ones doing criminal activity and terrible things on the weekends. And you've exiled them, if you've pushed them out, and the person who Jesus is the person who would be right in the midst of them, not also doing those things. Right? Like Jesus doesn't walk up and go, I want leprosy too. But that in the midst of that, he understands that Jesus is the one that can make them clean, that sometimes the dividing line, sometimes the exile is this, that the way that we talk about somebody is because they're sleeping around all the time, and so they're gross. I don't make those decisions. I'm holy and pure. I have a gossip issue, but the consequences are so much smaller, and so my problem is not as big as theirs. Those kids over there do this. Those kids over there do that. These kids over here are this. And we exile, and we create outcasts, and we forget that Jesus was not in the business of doing that. And then we claim to know Jesus. And that's a tension. And again, I'm not saying we do it intentionally, but what I am saying is, do we intentionally try to break that barrier? Do we intentionally try to push that aside? Do you know when you walk down the halls who the people are that you don't want to have a conversation with? I lost my mind for the longest time And it was a lot of it in middle school, but some of you are in ninth grade, so it's there as well. But that there was literally an option on Instagram, which I think is probably the worst thing that's ever happened to humanity, which is very difficult to say because a lot of terrible things have happened to humanity, is this moment where you could literally post and ask the question, how much do you think that I like you? Which is a terrible question to ask, and it's a dumb question to answer, and everybody's like, oh, well, this little sliding bar is how much. It doesn't gauge based off of number or anything. And then you would take a picture of it, share it, and be like, look at this person who thinks that we're best friends. I actually hate them. X. And then it was so awesome to get to teach Bible study the next week. Because we're the people who claim to know Jesus. That's insanity. And it's not who Jesus is. And so let me be very clear. To know Jesus is to care about the same people. So the inverse of that is true. And hold tight with me because I don't want you to miss this. If you don't care about the same people, you don't know the Jesus that's in the Bible. Like very cut and dry. If you go, no, I can know Jesus and still treat people terribly and exile them and push them away and not love them, that's not who Jesus is. That we don't know him, or we know a different version of him that is untrue to who he is, because Jesus cares about the outcast, the exiled, and the people that are far from him, no matter the depth of their sin. Not that they would stay there, but that he is the one who can make people clean. Because some of us are just as bad off, or we struggle with the same sickness, and we are the ones with leprosy. We just wear long sleeve shirts hoping nobody notices. So we can pretend to be clean. We just throw on Christian body spray and no one is fooled. My genuine hope is this. One, that if you're in this room and you've ever felt like an outcast or an exile from the church, and if you've ever felt that way from the people in this building, my apology is for you. Because my hope is that when you come into our building, you come into a place that is safe, of people that love you and want you to know Jesus. I'm not saying people that allow you to do whatever you want and are totally okay with whatever sin practice that you have, but that love you and that it's safe. That's my genuine hope, that it looks like Jesus. And that if you've ever felt that when you come into this building, to know this, that even if we do a poor job of it, Jesus loves you, no matter how much we have exiled you. And you belong here, not because we say, but because God says, through the person and work of Jesus Christ. Who are the outcasts and the unclean around you? And are you actively pursuing them? Actively. Do you see them? Do you know who they are? And do they know that they are loved by God because they know you? The most incredible thing about the leper is he comes running to Jesus. Now, you can't make anybody clean. No one is going to run to you to be clean, but are you so close to Jesus that someone might come to you because you are the closest to Jesus that they know? Would someone come to you because you know God better than anybody else that they know, and they have to know the Jesus that you know because it's different than the Jesus that they've been fed? Are you that person? When you grow up and you're a skinny white kid who's average at sports and not that great looking, you figure out how to draw some lines as fast as you can to race your way to the top of the social hierarchy as quick as you can get there. I spent the vast majority of my life exiling people away and making sure that people knew nothing about Jesus so I could have a higher seat at the table. There were friends that I didn't get to hang out with till my senior year of high school, because I spent all of the previous years making sure that they were hated and made fun of because of my own insecurities. I made sure they were treated like lepers so that way my social circle would be better. I live 60 minutes from my hometown, and I hate going back because there's a better chance that I run into somebody that I made their life miserable for all of their adolescence, which is already like the worst. Then I meet someone that I told about Jesus. They would come running to me because I knew the one who could make them clean. I don't want that for you. I don't want that for this ministry, for this room, or for this church. If we're going to be here and we're going to sing songs and we're going to study the Bible and we're going to talk about Jesus, we better not be a place that exiles people, because I don't want to be a part of that place. And my hope is that you don't want to be a part of that place either. There's a lot of other great youth pastors and churches in town that you can go be a part of those places to do great things, if that's going to be who we are. But if it's not, if we're going to be youth ministry that's for the city, that's bigger than just a Saturday doing some service projects, we're going to be for the exiled, we're going to be for the outcasts, that there's nobody that we treat wrongly, that everybody that we come into contact knows who Jesus is, if we're going to be that place, then we're going to have to tear down the walls and add some chairs. But if we just fill seats of people who like to hang out with one another, we're wasting our time. Because it's not who Jesus is.